Hey! She's in labor. Can someone help us?
Sir, please leave.
Denise, hang on. I got you.
It hurts. It really
She
hurts.
needs a room now.
Sir, you need to step back.
No, listen.
That's enough. Camera off.
The smartphone trembled in Marcus Reynolds' grip as he pointed it toward the reception desk, the tiny lens capturing a moment that would reshape lives, destroy careers, and shutter an entire medical institution in just 18 days. His wife Denise sat hunched in one of the waiting room chairs behind him, her hands pressed against her swollen belly, her face contorted with the kind of pain that made his heart feel like it was being crushed in a vice. She was 37 weeks pregnant, and something was wrong. He could see it in the way she breathed, short and sharp, nothing like the calm rhythm she had practiced in their birthing classes. He could see it in the way her eyes kept closing, as if she was trying to retreat somewhere inside herself, where the pain couldn't follow. And standing behind the polished reception counter, arms folded across her chest like a barrier, stood a woman in medical scrubs who had just uttered words that Marcus would never forget for as long as he lived. This wasn't happening. It couldn't be happening. Not here, not now, not in a place with the word care literally printed on its signage. But the camera was recording, and the evidence of what was unfolding in this private Arizona birthing center on an otherwise unremarkable Thursday evening in the fall of 2018 would soon be seen by millions. Before we go any deeper into this story, I want to ask you something. Where are you watching from right now? And if you haven't already, consider hitting that subscribe button because stories like this one need to be told, need to be shared, and need to be remembered so that we can work toward a world where they never happen again. Now let me take you back to the beginning, to the hours before everything changed. The sun had been setting over the city of Mesa, painting the Arizona sky in shades of burnt orange and deep purple that Denise had always found beautiful. She stood at the window of their modest two-bedroom apartment, one hand resting on the small of her back, the other pressed against the cool glass. At 31 years old, she was about to become a mother for the first time, and the magnitude of that transformation had been occupying her thoughts almost constantly for months. The nursery was ready, the car seat was installed, the hospital bag had been packed for weeks, sitting by the front door like a patient sentinel waiting for its moment to serve. Everything was in place. Everything was prepared. She and Marcus had done all the things the books and websites and well-meaning relatives had told them to do. They had attended classes. They had interviewed pediatricians. They had debated names until they finally settled on one that felt right. Isaiah, if it was a boy, which the ultrasound suggested it was. Isaiah Marcus Reynolds, a name that sounded strong and hopeful, like the future they were building together. Marcus had come home from his job at the distribution center around 6 that evening, tired but in good spirits. He worked long shifts, sometimes 12 hours on his feet, loading and unloading trucks, scanning packages, making sure the endless river of commerce kept flowing. It wasn't glamorous work, but it paid reasonably well, offered decent health insurance, and gave him the stability he needed to provide for his growing family. He was 33, had been with Denise for 7 years, married for 4, and he still felt a flutter of something like wonder when he looked at her. She was carrying their child. Their child. The reality of it still felt new, even after months of doctor's appointments and ultrasounds and feeling the baby kick against his palm. That evening, as he walked through the door and set down his keys, he noticed immediately that something was different. Denise's posture was wrong. She wasn't standing at the window enjoying the sunset. She was leaning against the wall beside it, her breathing slightly labored, her brow furrowed in a way that sent a spike of concern through his chest. "You okay?" he asked, crossing the room quickly. She looked up at him, and he saw it in her eyes before she spoke. Uncertainty, discomfort, a hint of fear she was trying to suppress. "I don't know," she said quietly. "Something feels off, different than before." Marcus felt his pulse quicken. They had been through moments like this before during the pregnancy, false alarms that turned out to be normal symptoms of a body doing extraordinary work. But something in her voice, in her expression, told him this was different. She wasn't the type to worry without reason. If anything, she tended to downplay her discomfort, to push through pain rather than complain about it. For her to admit that something felt wrong meant it really felt wrong. "What kind of different?" he pressed gently, moving to stand beside her. She closed her eyes, focusing inward the way she had learned to do in their prenatal classes, trying to read the signals her body was sending. Pressure, she said, more than usual, and these sharp pains that come and go, not like contractions, not rhythmic, just sudden and sharp, like something's pulling. Marcus didn't hesitate. He had promised himself months ago that he would never second-guess a moment like this, never be the husband who dismissed his wife's concerns and ended up regretting it. "We're going to get you checked out," he said firmly. "Get your shoes. I'll grab the bag." Denise nodded, relief flickering across her face. She had clearly been hoping he would say exactly that. As she moved slowly toward the bedroom to find her slip-on shoes, Marcus retrieved the hospital bag from its post by the door and slung it over his shoulder. He checked his pockets for his phone, his wallet, his keys. His mind was already running through logistics. Which hospital was closest? How long would it take to get there? What would they need to tell the medical staff? He was a planner by nature, someone who felt most comfortable when he had a clear path forward. Right now, the path was simple. Get Denise to a hospital, make sure she and the baby were okay, follow whatever instructions the doctors gave them. They made their way downstairs to the parking lot where their gray Honda Accord sat waiting. Marcus helped Denise into the passenger seat, adjusting the recline slightly to make her more comfortable. She was breathing through her mouth now, short, careful breaths, and he could see her wincing every minute or so as another wave of that sharp pain rippled through her. He got behind the wheel, started the engine, and pulled out of the parking lot. The evening traffic was moderate, nothing too heavy, and Marcus was grateful for that small mercy. He drove carefully but with purpose, keeping his speed just above the limit, his eyes alternating between the road ahead and his wife beside him. She had her eyes closed again, one hand on her belly, the other gripping the edge of her seat. Neither of them spoke much during the drive. There wasn't much to say. They both knew where they were going and why, and the weight of that knowledge filled the car like something physical. Their destination was Sunrise Family Birthing Center, a private facility about 15 minutes from their apartment. They had chosen it months earlier, during the period when expectant parents obsess over such decisions. The building was newer than the big county hospital. The reviews online were generally positive. The facility advertised specialized maternal care, smaller patient loads, more personalized attention. It seemed like the kind of place where they would feel less like numbers and more like people. Denise had even toured the facility once, early in her second trimester, and had come home feeling reassured. The rooms were clean and modern. The staff had seemed friendly. She had felt good about the choice. Marcus had never been inside, but he trusted his wife's judgment. Now, as he turned onto the street where the birthing center was located, he felt a knot of anxiety in his stomach that he tried to push aside. Everything was going to be fine. They were going to walk in. Someone was going to examine Denise. They were going to find out that whatever was happening was normal, or at least manageable. They would probably be home by midnight, maybe with some new instructions or a prescription, maybe with a story to tell Isaiah someday about the time Mommy scared Daddy half to death 3 weeks before the due date. The Sunrise Family Birthing Center sat on a corner lot, a 2-story building with a modern facade and carefully landscaped grounds. The exterior lighting was warm and welcoming, casting gentle pools of illumination across the entrance and the small parking area. A sign near the door displayed the facility's name in elegant script, along with a logo featuring a stylized sunrise. It looked exactly like the kind of place you would trust with something as precious as bringing a new life into the world. Clean, professional, reassuring. Marcus pulled into a parking spot close to the entrance and hurried around to help Denise out of the car. Her movements were slow and careful, and she leaned heavily on his arm as they made their way toward the automatic doors. He could feel her trembling slightly, whether from pain or fear or some combination of both. He squeezed her hand and tried to project a calm he didn't entirely feel. The doors slid open, and they stepped into the lobby. The space was smaller than a typical hospital emergency room, more intimate and less institutional. The lighting was soft, designed to be soothing. A few cushioned chairs lined one wall, and a couple sat in 2 of them, the woman also visibly pregnant, both of them looking at their phones. A television mounted in the corner played a cooking show on mute. The reception desk dominated the opposite wall, a curved counter with a computer monitor and a small stack of clipboards. And standing behind that counter, reviewing something on the screen in front of her, was a woman in dark blue scrubs with graying hair, pulled back in a tight bun. Marcus guided Denise toward the desk, his arm around her waist, supporting her weight. She was gritting her teeth now, fighting through another wave of that sharp, pulling pain. They reached the counter, and Marcus spoke up immediately, his voice carrying the urgency he felt. "Excuse me, my wife is pregnant, 37 weeks, and she's having severe pain. We need someone to examine her." The woman behind the counter looked up from her screen. Her eyes moved from Marcus to Denise, and then back to Marcus. There was something in her gaze that Marcus couldn't quite read, a flicker of something that didn't match the warm and welcoming atmosphere the facility was trying to project. Her name tag read Patricia Whitmore, CNM, Certified Nurse Midwife. For a moment, no one spoke. It was just a beat, maybe 2 seconds, but it stretched in Marcus's perception like taffy being pulled. 2 seconds during which he expected the woman to spring into action, to come around the counter, to call for assistance, to do any of the things you would expect a medical professional to do when a pregnant woman in obvious distress arrived seeking help. Instead, Patricia Whitmore tilted her head slightly and asked a question that made no sense. "Have you considered going somewhere else?" Marcus blinked. The words didn't register properly at first. They seemed to arrive in his brain as individual sounds rather than a coherent sentence. "I'm sorry, what?" "Other facilities." The woman clarified, her tone flat, almost bored. "There are other places in the area. County Hospital is about 20 minutes from here. They might be better equipped to help you." Marcus felt Denise's grip tighten on his arm. He looked down at his wife, saw the confusion on her face mixing with the pain, then looked back at the midwife. "But we're already here," he said, stating the obvious because the obvious suddenly needed stating. "My wife is in pain right now. She needs to be seen right now." The midwife's expression didn't change. She remained behind the counter, arms now folded across her chest, making no move to assist. "We're quite full at the moment," she said. "Staffing issues. It might be several hours before anyone can see her." Marcus glanced past the counter, through the windows that looked into the hallway beyond. He could see doors to patient rooms, and at least 3 of them stood open, revealing empty beds. He could see 2 nurses in the hallway, standing near a supply cart, chatting casually. Nothing about the scene suggested a facility overwhelmed with patients. Nothing suggested the kind of crisis that would justify turning away a pregnant woman in distress. "There are empty rooms right there," Marcus said, pointing, "and I can see staff walking around." "What do you mean you can't see her?" The midwife's jaw tightened almost imperceptibly. "Sir, I understand you're concerned, but I'm telling you that we are not in a position to help you right now. You need to try somewhere else." Denise made a small sound, almost a whimper, as another jolt of pain hit her. She leaned more heavily against Marcus, and he could feel her legs starting to buckle. He helped her into one of the waiting chairs, then turned back to the counter, his heart pounding, his mind racing. What was happening here? Why was this woman making excuses? Why wasn't she helping? "Look," Marcus said, trying to keep his voice steady even though he wanted to shout, "I don't know what the issue is here, but my wife is pregnant and she's in pain. We came to a place that says it provides maternity care. I need someone to examine her. That's all I'm asking." Patricia Whitmore sighed, a sound that somehow managed to convey both impatience and something else, something colder. "Sir, I'm going to be honest with you. The type of care your wife might need is beyond what we typically handle here. You really would be better served going to a larger facility." "The type of care?" Marcus repeated. "What type of care? We don't even know what's wrong yet because no one has examined her." The midwife unfolded her arms and placed her hands on the counter, leaning forward slightly. "I'm going to need you to lower your voice. You're disturbing the other patients." Marcus looked around. The other couple in the waiting area was watching now, their phones forgotten, their expressions a mixture of curiosity and discomfort. He forced himself to take a breath. Getting angry wouldn't help Denise. Making a scene wouldn't get her examined faster. He needed to stay calm, to reason with this woman, to figure out what was really going on. "I'm not trying to cause a problem," he said, his voice quieter but still firm. "I just want my wife to receive care. That's why we came here. That's what this place is for, right?" The midwife straightened up, and something shifted in her expression. The mask of professionalism she had been maintaining began to slip, revealing something uglier underneath. "Let me explain something to you," she said, her voice dropping to a register that was almost conversational, almost casual, as if she were discussing something mundane rather than the well-being of a pregnant woman and her unborn child. "I've been doing this job for over 20 years. I know what kind of patients are a good fit for this facility and what kind aren't. Your wife isn't a good fit. I'm recommending you go elsewhere. That's my professional judgment." Marcus stared at her. The words hung in the air between them, loaded with meaning that he was only beginning to grasp. Not a good fit. What did that mean? What could it possibly mean? Denise was pregnant. This was a birthing center. How could a pregnant woman not be a good fit for a birthing center? And then, like a key turning in a lock, something clicked in Marcus's mind. He looked at the midwife's face, at the way she was looking at him, or rather, at the way she was avoiding looking at him directly. He thought about the way her demeanor had changed the moment she looked up from her screen and saw them standing there. He thought about the empty rooms and the available staff and the transparent excuses. He thought about the fact that he and Denise were black, and this woman and everyone else he had seen in the facility so far was white. No, it couldn't be that. This was 2018. This was a medical facility. People didn't do that anymore, didn't think that way anymore, not in places where they were supposed to help people regardless of who they were. That was illegal. That was against every oath healthcare providers took. That was something from history books and documentaries, not something that happened in modern waiting rooms. But the evidence was standing right in front of him, arms folded again, waiting for him to accept her refusal and leave. And behind him, his wife was suffering. His child was potentially in danger, and this woman who had the power to help was choosing not to. Something shifted in Marcus in that moment. A lifetime of experiences, of microaggressions and subtle slights and moments of being treated as less than, coalesced into a cold, clear certainty. He was being discriminated against. His wife was being denied care. And if he didn't do something, if he just accepted this and walked away, then this woman would get away with it. She would do it again to the next black couple who walked through those doors. She would keep doing it until someone stopped her. Marcus reached into his pocket and pulled out his phone. His hands were steadier than he expected as he opened the camera app and switched it to video mode. He held the phone up, pointed it at the midwife, and pressed record. "I'm documenting this," he said, his voice clearer now, more controlled. "I'm filming you denying care to my pregnant wife who is in pain. I want you to explain to this camera why you're refusing to help us." Patricia Whitmore's eyes went to the phone. Her expression flickered, uncertainty mixing with irritation, but she didn't step back or try to hide. If anything, she seemed to stand a little straighter, as if rising to meet a challenge. And what happened next would become the centerpiece of a scandal that would reverberate far beyond the walls of this modest birthing center. "Put that phone away," she said flatly. "No," Marcus replied. "I'm within my rights to film. We're in a public area. You're denying care to my wife, and I want it on record. So please, tell me again why you can't help her." Let me pause here for a moment and ask you something. Have you ever been in a situation where you knew something was deeply wrong but felt powerless to stop it? Where the authority in front of you was doing something unjust and you had to decide in a split second how to respond? Drop your experience in the comments. I want to hear how you've handled moments like this, because Marcus was standing at exactly that crossroads, and what he chose to do next would change everything. The camera was rolling. The moment stretched. Marcus could hear his own heartbeat in his ears, could hear Denise's labored breathing behind him, could hear the faint sound of the cooking show still playing on the muted television. The fluorescent lights hummed overhead. Everything seemed to crystallize into this single point in time. Patricia Whitmore looked at the camera, then at Marcus, then at the camera again. And then, as if deciding that she simply didn't care anymore, she said the words that would seal her fate. "I don't provide care to certain kinds of patients." Certain kinds of patients. The words landed like a physical blow. Marcus felt his stomach drop, even as his mind raced to process what he was hearing. She had said it. She had actually said it, not hidden behind bureaucratic language or plausible excuses, but stated plainly, recorded clearly, captured forever on the device in his hand. "Certain kinds of patients," Marcus repeated, making sure the camera caught his response. "What kinds of patients would those be?" The midwife's chin lifted slightly, defiantly. "I think you know what I mean, and I'm telling you that you need to take your wife somewhere else. We can't help you here." Behind him, Denise spoke up, her voice strained with pain but carrying a note of disbelief. "Are you serious right now? I'm having a medical emergency, and you're telling us to leave because of what? Because of who we are?" Patricia Whitmore's gaze shifted to Denise, and there was no warmth in it, no compassion, no recognition of the suffering sitting right in front of her. "I'm telling you that this isn't the right facility for you. That's my professional opinion. Now please leave before I have to call security." Marcus kept the camera trained on her face. He wanted every moment recorded, every word captured, every trace of expression preserved. He panned down to her name tag, making sure the letters were visible. Patricia Whitmore, CNM. Then he turned slightly, showing Denise in the waiting chair, her face twisted with pain, her hands pressed against her belly. He turned back to the midwife. "My wife is pregnant," he said, his voice steady despite the chaos in his chest. "She is in pain. This is a birthing center, and you are refusing to help her because of the color of our skin. I want you to confirm that for the camera." "I don't have to confirm anything," the midwife snapped, "and I don't have to explain myself to you. You've been told to leave. Now do it." For a long moment, Marcus didn't move. Part of him wanted to stay, to force a confrontation, to make this woman face the enormity of what she was doing. But another part, the part that was focused on Denise, reminded him that every second they spent here was a second they weren't getting his wife actual medical attention. He had what he needed. The evidence was on his phone. The truth was recorded. Now he needed to get his wife somewhere that would actually help her. He lowered the phone but kept it recording, capturing the ambient sounds and the movement as he crossed to Denise and helped her to her feet. She was crying now, silent tears streaming down her cheeks, and Marcus felt his own eyes burning with a mix of fury and heartbreak. This was supposed to be a moment of care, of protection, of welcoming their child into the world. Instead, it had become something ugly and hateful. "We're going," Marcus said to the midwife, not looking at her, guiding Denise toward the door. "But this isn't over, not by a long shot." The automatic doors slid open, and they walked out into the cool evening air. The sunset had faded now, leaving behind a deep blue twilight, punctuated by the first stars of the night. Marcus helped Denise back to the car, each step an eternity, his mind churning with rage and fear in equal measure. He got her seated, reclined the seat a bit more, then rushed around to the driver's side and started the engine. "Marcus?" Denise said weakly, and when he looked at her, he saw that her eyes were wide with pain and fear. "The baby. What if something's wrong with the baby?" "We're going to find out," he said, pulling out of the parking lot with more speed than he had used on the way there. "There's another hospital, Valley General, about 25 minutes from here. They'll help us. I promise." He drove through the darkening streets of Mesa with a singular focus, breaking speed limits, running yellow lights, doing everything he could to shave minutes off the journey. Denise gripped the door handle and tried to breathe through the pain. Neither of them spoke about what had happened at sunrise. There would be time for that later. Right now, all that mattered was getting to someone who would actually help. Valley General Medical Center was a larger facility, a sprawling complex of buildings that served a wide swath of the surrounding community. Marcus pulled up to the emergency entrance, threw the car into park, and was out of his seat before the engine had fully stopped running. He ran around to Denise's side, helped her out, and half carried her through the automatic doors into a brightly lit waiting area that was considerably more crowded than the one they had just left. A triage nurse spotted them immediately and rose from her station, concern evident on her face. "What's the situation?" she asked, already moving toward them. "My wife is pregnant, 37 weeks, severe abdominal pain," Marcus said in a rush. "We were just turned away from another facility. Please, she needs help." The nurse didn't hesitate. She called out to a colleague, and within moments, a wheelchair appeared. Denise was settled into it and whisked through a set of double doors into the treatment area. Marcus followed, answering questions as they came, providing Denise's information, describing her symptoms, trying to convey everything important while his heart raced and his hands shook. They put Denise in a bed in a curtained-off area. Monitors were attached. Vitals were taken. A doctor appeared, a young woman with kind eyes and a calm manner, who performed a quick examination and ordered an ultrasound. The minutes that followed were some of the longest of Marcus's life. He held Denise's hand and watched the medical team work with efficient professionalism, doing exactly what he had expected and hoped the other facility would do. The ultrasound technician arrived with her portable machine. Cold gel was applied to Denise's belly. The wand moved across her skin, and images appeared on the screen. Marcus didn't know how to read ultrasound images, but he watched the technician's face, looking for any sign of alarm. He saw concentration, but no panic. Finally, the doctor returned with the results. "Good news," she said, and Marcus felt his entire body sag with relief. "Baby looks good, strong heartbeat, proper position, no signs of distress. What you've been experiencing appears to be prodromal labor, sometimes called false labor. It can be quite painful and feel very real, but it doesn't indicate that delivery is imminent." "So she's okay?" Marcus asked. "The baby's okay?" "They're both okay," the doctor confirmed with a warm smile. "We want to keep monitoring for another hour or so, just to be safe. But all signs are positive. You're not quite ready to have this baby yet, but soon. A few more weeks, probably." Denise closed her eyes, and Marcus saw fresh tears track down her temples. But these were tears of relief. He leaned down and pressed his forehead to hers, overwhelmed with gratitude that they had found their way to people who actually cared. But even as the relief washed over him, the anger was still there, simmering beneath the surface. They were okay. But what if they hadn't been? What if this had been a real emergency, something that required immediate intervention? They had lost nearly an hour being turned away and driving to a different hospital. An hour that, under different circumstances, could have cost them everything. He thought about the video on his phone, about the words captured there, about the woman who had stood behind a counter and refused to help his suffering wife because of what she looked like. And he knew, with a certainty that settled into his bones, that he was not going to let this go. They were discharged a few hours later, after midnight, with instructions to return if Denise's symptoms changed or intensified. Marcus drove home slowly this time, exhaustion settling over both of them like a heavy blanket. Denise fell asleep almost immediately once they got back to the apartment, her body demanding rest after the ordeal. But Marcus couldn't sleep. He sat on the couch in the dim living room, his phone in his hands, and watched the video. He watched it 3 times. Each time, the midwife's words hit him anew. Certain kinds of patience, the casual cruelty of it, the complete absence of shame or hesitation. This was a person who had been entrusted with the care of mothers and babies, and she had looked at a pregnant woman in pain and decided that the color of her skin made her unworthy of help. Marcus thought about all the things he could do. He could file a complaint with the hospital, he could contact a lawyer, he could report the incident to the state medical board. All of those things would take time, would get lost in bureaucratic processes, might or might not result in any real consequences. Meanwhile, that woman would still be there, still turning away patients, still practicing the kind of discrimination that should have been eradicated decades ago. Or he could do something else, something faster. Something that would ensure this didn't get buried or ignored or quietly settled with a confidentiality agreement. He could share the video. The thought both terrified and energized him. Posting something like this meant exposing himself and Denise to public scrutiny. It meant reliving the moment over and over as it spread. It meant potential backlash, criticism, people questioning their account or defending the midwife. It meant giving up control of their story once it was out there. But it also meant truth. It meant evidence that couldn't be denied or spun or explained away. It meant putting a face and a voice to the kind of discrimination that so often remained hidden, simple, and direct. He identified the facility, the date, the circumstances. He described what had happened in straightforward terms, and he let the video speak for itself. Then he put down his phone and finally, fitfully, slept. When he woke up late the next morning, groggy and disoriented, Denise was still asleep and his phone was filled with notifications. The video had accumulated over 4,000 views in just a few hours. Comments were pouring in, messages from strangers expressing outrage and support, shares that were spreading it beyond his network into territory he couldn't track. By the end of that first day, the view count had crossed 50,000. Local news outlets had begun reaching out for comments. Civil rights organizations had shared the video with their followers. A hashtag had emerged. The story was taking on a life of its own. Marcus watched it happen with a mixture of amazement and apprehension. This was what he had wanted, wasn't it? For people to see. For the truth to be undeniable. But the scale of it was overwhelming. His phone barely stopped buzzing. He had to turn off notifications just to think straight. Denise woke up around noon, and he showed her what was happening. She sat on the couch, wrapped in a blanket, watching the view count tick upward, reading some of the comments. Her expression cycled through disbelief, anger, sadness, and finally something that looked like grim satisfaction. "Good," she said quietly. "Let everyone see. Let them see exactly what happened. Let that woman explain herself to the whole world." The Sunrise Family Birthing Center issued its first statement that evening, approximately 20 hours after the video went online. It was the kind of corporate speak that Marcus had expected. Concerns are being taken seriously. Thorough review is underway. Commitment to providing equitable care to all patients. The statement didn't mention Patricia Whitmore by name. It didn't acknowledge that anything wrong had actually happened. It was designed to buy time and minimize damage. It didn't work. The video had been viewed over 200,000 times by then. Screenshots of the midwife's face and name tag were being circulated. People were leaving one-star reviews on every platform where the facility had a presence. Journalists were digging into the center's history, requesting public records, interviewing former patients. The story that Marcus had unleashed was now much bigger than one video and one night. Within 3 days, other people began coming forward. A woman named Carmen Reyes spoke to a local television station about her experience at Sunrise 2 years earlier, when she had been dismissed and talked over by staff who seemed to regard her with suspicion and disdain. A man named Derek Washington wrote a long post about how his sister had been treated rudely and made to wait an excessive time while white patients were seen before her. These weren't isolated incidents. A pattern was emerging, and the evidence was becoming impossible to ignore. The state health department announced an investigation on day 5. Inspectors would be reviewing records, interviewing staff, examining protocols and practices. The facility was required to cooperate fully. Suddenly, the walls that Patricia Whitmore had built around her little kingdom were being scaled by people with actual authority to see what was inside. Day 7 brought a development that shifted the narrative even further. Investigative journalists discovered that Patricia Whitmore wasn't just an employee of the Sunrise Family Birthing Center. She was the owner. She had founded the facility 12 years earlier and had been its primary operator ever since. This wasn't a case of a single bad actor in an otherwise healthy institution. This was a case where the rot started at the very top, where the prejudice and discrimination that Marcus and Denise had experienced was baked into the DNA of the place. The revelation added fuel to a fire that was already burning hot. People were calling for the facility to be shut down. Local politicians were issuing statements condemning healthcare discrimination. Protesters gathered outside the center's doors, holding signs and chanting. News vans became a fixture on the street, their satellite dishes a constant reminder that the world was watching. Inside the facility, things were falling apart. Staff members began resigning, some out of conscience, others out of self-preservation. Patients who were in the midst of their prenatal care made arrangements to transfer to other providers. Appointments were canceled. The phone lines rang with angry callers demanding accountability. The pristine lobby that had seemed so welcoming grew quiet and tense. Patricia Whitmore made no public statements. She hired a lawyer and retreated behind legal barriers. But the video was still out there, still being watched, still being shared. Every time someone new saw it, they heard her words in her own voice. Certain kinds of patients. There was no spinning that. There was no explaining it away. The evidence was clear, and it was damning. Imagine being in Marcus's position during those days. Imagine watching the thing you unleashed grow into something far beyond what you expected. Imagine the phone calls and messages, the interview requests, the complete disruption of normal life. He had wanted accountability. He was getting a firestorm, and through it all, he had to keep caring for his wife, had to keep preparing for the arrival of their child, had to find moments of peace in the chaos. If you're still watching, let me know in the comments. Do you think Marcus made the right call posting that video? What would you have done differently or the same? These moments of choice define us. This story is proof of that. The official investigation took 10 days to produce preliminary findings, but the unofficial verdict from the court of public opinion came much faster. Day 9 saw the facility's insurance provider announce that it was reviewing its coverage, citing material concerns about liability and regulatory compliance. Day 11 brought news that several lawsuits had been filed against the center and against Patricia Whitmore personally, including one from Marcus and Denise, who had retained a civil rights attorney. Day 14 saw the state medical board announce that Patricia Whitmore's credentials were being formally reviewed and that she had been placed on provisional status pending the outcome. And then on Day 18, someone driving past the Sunrise Family Birthing Center noticed something new on the chain-link fence that had been erected around the property. A sign, simple and stark and final, closed, 18 days from the moment Marcus pressed record to the moment that sign went up. 18 days from viral video to institutional collapse. The speed of it was staggering. In the pre-social media era, something like this might have taken months or years to address, if it was addressed at all. Complaints would have been filed and forgotten. Bureaucratic processes would have ground forward at their own pace. The victims would have been left to carry their trauma quietly while the perpetrators continued their work. But this was the digital age. This was an era when a single video could be seen by millions in a matter of days, when public outrage could translate into real pressure on institutions and regulators, when the truth, once documented, could spread faster than any spin or damage control. The closure of the facility was not the end of the story. It was, in many ways, just the beginning of a longer process of accountability. The state investigation continued, eventually uncovering a litany of violations beyond the discrimination that had sparked everything: improper record-keeping, credentialing issues with some staff members, failure to meet certain standards of care. The discrimination case had opened a door, and behind that door was a mess of problems that had been allowed to accumulate for years. Patricia Whitmore faced personal consequences that extended far beyond losing her business. The medical board's review resulted in the revocation of her midwifery license. She could no longer practice anywhere in the state, could no longer hold the professional identity she had built over more than 2 decades. Her name, which had once been associated with a successful birthing center, was now synonymous with one of the most clear-cut cases of healthcare discrimination caught on video. The financial consequences were equally severe. The lawsuits piled up. Former patients who had hesitated to speak out found courage in numbers and added their voices to the chorus. Settlement negotiations dragged on for months, but the eventual payouts were substantial. Between legal fees, settlements, and the loss of her facility, Patricia Whitmore was financially ruined. The institution she had built over 12 years collapsed in less than 3 weeks. For Marcus and Denise, the weeks following the video's release were a whirlwind. They gave interviews, though they tried to limit their exposure and protect their privacy as much as possible. They weren't seeking fame. They had never wanted any of this. They just wanted their child to be born safely and their dignity to be respected. The fact that such basic expectations required a viral video and a national scandal to be met was itself a kind of tragedy. Denise's pregnancy progressed normally. The prodromal labor that had sent them to the hospital that fateful night was followed by several weeks of uneventful waiting. She rested as much as she could, trying to avoid stress, though stress was everywhere during those days. Marcus took time off work to care for her and to manage the chaos that their life had become. They leaned on family and friends. They held on to each other. On a Thursday morning, roughly 5 weeks after the video was posted, Denise went into real labor. Marcus drove her to Valley General, the hospital that had helped them when no one else would. The staff there remembered them, treated them with warmth and respect, gave them the care they deserved. The delivery was long but uncomplicated, and at 3:27 in the afternoon, Isaiah Marcus Reynolds came into the world, healthy and loud and perfect. Marcus held his son for the first time and felt tears streaming down his face. This was the moment they had been working toward, the reason they had gone to that first hospital, the reason everything had happened, this tiny life, this new beginning. He looked at Denise, exhausted but radiant, and thought about everything they had endured to reach this moment. The pain, the fear, the humiliation, the fight. All of it had led here, to this room, to this baby, to this family. The world outside continued to process what had happened. The video became a touchstone in discussions about healthcare discrimination. Advocacy groups used it in their campaigns. Medical schools incorporated it into their curriculum on ethics and bias. Policymakers pointed to it as justification for stricter oversight and enforcement of anti-discrimination laws. The ripple effects spread outward, touching institutions and conversations far beyond the original incident. The Arizona state legislature took up a bill that would strengthen penalties for healthcare discrimination and improve reporting mechanisms for patients who experienced it. The bill was nicknamed by some as the Isaiah Law, though it was never officially titled that. It passed with bipartisan support, a rare moment of agreement in an otherwise divided political landscape. Whatever their other differences, lawmakers could unite around the principle that pregnant women should not be turned away from care because of their race. The empty building that had once been the Sunrise Family Birthing Center sat vacant for months, then years. Its windows grew dusty, its landscaping became overgrown, graffiti appeared on its walls, then was painted over, then appeared again. It became a kind of monument to what had happened there, a physical reminder that discrimination has consequences, that justice is possible, that the truth eventually comes to light. Driving past it, as Marcus sometimes did, felt surreal. He would remember walking through those doors with Denise on his arm, full of fear and hope, seeking help that should have been freely given. He would remember standing at the counter, phone in hand, recording the words that would change everything. He would remember the midwife's face, the coldness in her eyes, the casual cruelty of her refusal, and he would remind himself that he had done the right thing by documenting it, by sharing it, by refusing to let it disappear into silence. Some people criticized him, of course. That was inevitable. There were those who questioned the narrative, who suggested there must be more to the story, who defended Patricia Whitmore or attacked Marcus's motives. Social media always has its contrarians, its trolls, its defenders of the indefensible, but the video was there, undeniable and clear. The words were there, spoken in the speaker's own voice. The evidence was beyond dispute. In the years that followed, Marcus and Denise settled into the ordinary rhythms of parenthood. Diapers and feeding schedules, sleepless nights and first smiles, the all-consuming reality of a new life that demands everything and gives everything in return. Isaiah grew from an infant into a toddler, then into a young child full of energy and curiosity. He had no idea, of course, what had happened before he was born, what his parents had endured to bring him into the world. Someday, they would tell him. Someday, he would understand. But for now, they focused on giving him the childhood he deserved, on building the family they had always wanted, on moving forward from trauma without forgetting its lessons. They became advocates in their own quiet way, speaking to community groups and medical students about their experience, emphasizing the importance of documentation and the necessity of demanding accountability. They didn't do it for attention or money. They did it because they believed it mattered, because they had seen firsthand what a single documented incident could accomplish. The broader healthcare system continued to grapple with the issues their case had highlighted. Studies showed persistent disparities in maternal care for Black women, higher rates of complications and mortality that couldn't be explained by medical factors alone. The reasons were complex, rooted in history and bias and systemic inequities that couldn't be solved by any single video or scandal. But cases like Marcus and Denise's kept the conversation alive, kept the pressure on, kept pushing toward a future where every patient would be treated with equal dignity regardless of what they looked like. Patricia Whitmore disappeared from public view after losing her license and her facility. She didn't give interviews or make statements. She became a cautionary tale, a name invoked when discussing healthcare discrimination, a face attached to the concept of professional misconduct. Whatever she did with her life after that, she did it quietly, away from the attention that her own words had brought upon her. The couple received their settlement from the lawsuits, a substantial amount that they put toward their family's future, a better apartment, an education fund for Isaiah, a financial cushion that gave them breathing room they had never had before. It was money born from trauma, but they accepted it without guilt. They had earned it, they had suffered for it, and it represented, in concrete terms, the price that discrimination was required to pay. If you've made it this far into this story, thank you for staying with it. This isn't the kind of narrative with a neat, happy ending. Discrimination in healthcare still exists. Black mothers still face higher risks than white mothers. Bias still shapes how patients are treated in ways both obvious and subtle. The fight is far from over, but Marcus and Denise's story shows that change is possible, that documentation matters, that speaking up can make a difference, That one video, shot on a shaking smartphone by a terrified husband, can bring down an institution and reshape conversations and contribute to laws and policies that will protect others in the future. The building is still there, empty and quiet, a monument to accountability. The video is still out there, still being viewed, still being discussed. The lesson is still relevant. When you see something wrong, document it. When you have evidence, share it. When you face injustice, speak up. Not everyone will listen. Not every battle will be won. But truth has power, and sometimes 18 days is all it takes for that power to transform everything. Marcus still thinks about that night sometimes. Standing at that counter, phone in hand, heart pounding, wife suffering behind him, a choice to be made in a moment. Accept the injustice or record it. Walk away or fight back. Stay silent or speak. He chose to speak, and because he did, a discriminatory institution closed its doors. A prejudiced professional lost her career. A community confronted uncomfortable truths. A state passed new protections. A national conversation gained new momentum. A family found justice. And a little boy named Isaiah, who would grow up knowing nothing of what his parents endured for him, would enter a world just slightly more fair than it had been before he was born. That's what one video can do. That's what one moment of courage can change. That's why stories like this need to be told, need to be heard, need to be remembered. Subscribe if you want to see more stories that matter. Share this video so others can learn from what happened. And remember, in a world where your dignity can be denied with a shrug and a few cold words, documentation is defense. Truth is power, and speaking up is sometimes the only way to ensure that justice prevails. The Sunrise Family Birthing Center sign came down eventually. The building was sold, renovated, turned into something else. But for Marcus, driving past that corner would always bring back memories. The fear and the fury. The video that changed everything. The 18 days that brought an institution to its knees. And the quiet satisfaction of knowing that he did the right thing. That when faced with hatred, he chose to fight. That when given the chance to stay silent, he chose to speak. That when his wife and child needed him most, he rose to the moment. That's what this story is really about. Not just the injustice that was committed, but the courage that confronted it. Not just the discrimination that was documented, but the accountability that followed. Not just the wrong that was done, but the right that was demanded. And in the end, the right prevailed. Not perfectly, not completely, but substantially, measurably, undeniably. A closed sign on a fence, a revoked license, a changed law, a shifted conversation, a family made whole. That's what justice looks like. Sometimes it comes slowly, ground out through years of legal battles and advocacy. Sometimes it comes quickly, sparked by a moment captured on camera and spread across the world. But it comes. It can come. It will continue to come as long as there are people willing to document the truth and share it with the world. Marcus knew that now. He knew it in his bones. And as he watched his son grow, as he built his family, as he moved forward with his life, he carried that knowledge with him like a torch that would never go out. The truth matters. Documentation matters. Speaking up matters. And sometimes the camera you carry in your pocket is the most powerful weapon you have. Use it.